stars.
Yeah. Don't
Someone
you know?
wrote a song about it.
So I would prefer, just because I don't want to mess up any of the settings that I have set up for the class right now, if you have a question, unmute yourself, feel free to ask it, because I don't really know that I'm going to be toggling into the chat a lot. So feel free to interrupt, just as if we were in a real regular class. If you are not speaking, please mute your mic. I'm sure everybody knows at this point that it's kind of crazy to have all that background noise. So we will go ahead and get started. Congratulations, you guys got me to play with PowerPoint for the first time since I graduated high school. So what is Tidewater? The Tidewater Initiative, which is the full name for it, was dubbed Tidewater for short, began in 2003. The process is intended to help limit the number of cases that reach the reconsideration of value phase, and it helps to provide a more timely response to cases that are submitted for reconsideration. And I include this information because I'm actually going to try to get into that whole process as well. So you need to know that that's why they started doing this. When an appraisal comes in short of value, the VA appraiser invokes Tidewater. And then this process allows the VA program participants, which is usually the lenders, and then any of their authorized participants like the agents, to provide relevant market data, also known as comparables, to VA appraisers for their consideration. Ellen?
It's not just VA.
You mean for like FHA?
Yeah. The buyer for Heather's house was not a VA buyer, I don't believe. And we got Tidewater on that one. Joe's got a conventional one that we're trying to close that also got Tidewater just recently.
I was not aware of that. I've never encountered it on anything other than that. And I see a chat, maybe, is Tidewater just for you or VA? Does it apply to USDA? Right, based off of what Ellen's saying, I would imagine that probably any government-backed loan then. I've only encountered it on VA. But I imagine that if this is the process that they've subscribed to it, then that would probably continue to any other type of loan program that they're going to use it for. All right. So there is no guarantee that the appraiser is going to use the comparables to actually change their opinion of value. I'm sure that some of you guys have encountered that, especially with the way that everything is going right now. So how does the notification process work? If the VA appraiser is having difficulty establishing value, they are required to notify the listed point of contact and inform them that it appears that the appraisal value will come in below the purchase price. So typically that's going to be they notify the lender's going to turn around and notify the agent. The buyer's agent will usually notify the listing agent, and it's typically the listing agent that provides the comparables. Depending on the level of involvement of the buyer's agent, they may want to provide comparables as well. It could have just bled over as appraisers found us a ready resource to get good comps. Thank you, Joe. That was just a comment from Joe if anybody would like to take a look. So the appraiser is not allowed to discuss the current findings of the appraisal, only that they are invoking Tidewater and calling for additional information. So I see this a lot where people will be like, well, where are we at right now? We're not privy to that information, and they're not at liberty to disclose that information. We just know that they're having a difficult time establishing value. So once notified of Tidewater, the point of contact will have 2 working days to provide the requested additional information, which is why it is super important that as soon as you receive notice of Tidewater, that you as a listing agent work on your comparables and get them submitted to the lender as soon as possible. And then after receiving the additional information, the appraiser is going to complete the appraisal, noting that the Tidewater process was used. So this is my example of my Tidewater grid. To work us through this particular class, I often find that the easiest way to learn is to go through a real life situation. So this is a Tidewater grid that I actually used on a property where I had been notified of Tidewater. To protect the identities of the innocent houses involved, I have taken the liberty of changing the names of their addresses. So you make sure you keep an eye on that. But the house in question is 123 My Listing Drive, and it is in Alexis Town. We have 6 comparables. All of them are also in Alexis Town. And you can see that in my grid, I've got the address, the proximity to the subject, the sales price, the dollar per square foot of the gross living area, where I got the data from, the days on market, seller concessions, the date of the sale, the type of location, the leasehold fee simple, the acreage, the view, quality of construction, actual age, condition, room count, gross living area, basement type, garage or carport, porch, patio, deck, which that's kind of my catch-all for any additional features that the property has, and then fireplace. I have all of this in an Excel spreadsheet. I have saved it in one of my folders on my computer, and it just says Tidewater grid. And anytime I get a Tidewater request, this is all already here, and I just change the data based off of the subject property and the comparables that I want to use. So don't recreate the wheel every time you get a Tidewater request. I would have a grid ready to go. And if you've ever done a BPO or a market analysis, it's very similar to that. The biggest thing is that you are not allowed to make adjustments. You're just presenting data. So these are my actual subject and my actual comparables. Like I said, the only information that I changed was the name of the road. I always like to include a letter. Sorry, I'm going to try to.
Alexis, you muted yourself.
You're muted. Oh, there you
Okay,
go.
I'm
There you
good.
go.
I was really hoping to avoid this. Okay, so I don't know. Thank you. I don't know, I can't guarantee that this ever actually makes a difference, but I like to include it. And specifically in this case, I feel like my letters of explanation did make a difference. So kind of wanted to share with you guys what kind of stuff I put in there. And this is, in my mind, this is my ability to sell my property. I'm selling it to the appraiser that it's different, that it's better, that it's justified, that we put it under contract for what we put it under for. So to whom it may concern, it has been requested that I provide comparables for the subject property at 123 My Listing Drive in Alexis Town, North Carolina. I've provided 6 comparables within a 2-mile radius of the subject property. The first 4 comparables provided are all located within the same community, are of the same style and construction quality, are in similar condition, and are similar in age and square footage to the subject property. The 5th comparable is located in a comparable nearby community and is also similar in style, construction, condition, age, and square footage. The 6th comparable is similar in style, construction, condition, age, and square footage, but has an inferior location with road frontage on equivalent highway. I respectfully request that you consider the provided comparables when determining the appraised value of 123 My Listing Drive, Alexis Town. Please don't hesitate to contact me with any questions or concerns that you may have. I thank you for your time and effort, respectfully. Obviously, you always want to be really, really nice because you need these people to like you. Because if they don't like you, I just don't ever find a time that that's going to work in your favor. The reason why I wanted to point this out, you know, especially with that last part where I say the 6th comparable is similar in all these ways, but the location is inferior. That's just another opportunity for you to show them, hey, if this house got this value and my house has this value, but this house is in an inferior location, then clearly it should be a further justification that my house is good enough. So that's an example of the letter I provided for that particular property. So then what happens? Hopefully the additional information that you provided will result in the property appraising for the contract price. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way. And this was one of those times. If memory serves me correctly, this particular property underappraised by $17,000. So we got the appraisal in. And if the information provided does not result in the value meeting or exceeding the sales price, the appraiser will report the following information. And this is really important. Who provided the additional information? What information was provided? And why this information did not change the opinion of value. So in this particular case, in some cases they can do an addendum. In this particular case, the appraiser actually included it in the appraisal. So when we got the low appraisal, it was in the text of the appraisal why he ruled out each of my individual comparables. So we're going to get to that. So then what do you do if it still doesn't appraise? This is when you do the reconsideration of value. If the Tidewater process does not result in a change of the opinion of value, you can request a reconsideration of value from the buyer or lender. This is kind of building upon that process, and that's why I told you guys in the beginning, the initial purpose of Tidewater was to keep properties from getting to this point, because this actually goes to the VA and it actually involves manpower at the VA, and they wanted to try to head off issues before it got to this point. So this is not meant to be used in all cases. And I've had cases where the value came in low and I couldn't argue the appraisal. The guy made sense. We knew that we were on the edge and on the cusp of being priced really high. So I didn't necessarily go to the reconsideration of value. We've got a chat. Let me see what's coming in. Okay, so for how often does the Tidewater work and the reconsideration? I don't even know if you can prescribe an overall percentage. I think that there's a lot of different factors involved. I think the individual property, you know, those can be so different. The appraisers can be so different. I know of the last 4 or 5 the last 5 Tidewaters I've had, I think only one of them did not result in us getting full contract price. And sorry, the other one didn't, but we went to a reconsideration of value, and after my reconsideration of value, I did get contract price. So the last 5 Tidewaters I've had, only one of them did not get us what we wanted. And I think that was like a $5,000 difference. So go to the next one. So the reconsideration of value, this is a big thing. The reconsideration of value request has to come from the buyer. So the buyer has to agree to engage in this part of the process. If the buyer does not agree to pursue a reconsideration of value, then this isn't an option. So at that point, you just got to either rehash the terms of your contract or go your separate ways. But if the buyer does agree to engage in the reconsideration of value, then you can proceed to do the rest of what we're going to talk about. So typically, if the buyer agrees, the lender will take the additional information and submit it to the VA for reconsideration of value on the buyer's behalf. So this is getting into the nitty-gritty of the actual appraisal that I had where this was an issue. This is verbatim the text that the appraiser provided in the appraisal. The only thing that we switched is some of the dates, again, to protect the anonymity of the houses involved. But otherwise, you know, when we changed the names, we kept all the names consistent throughout. But you can see that he made a couple of notes, and there were some things I took issue with. And I bring this up to you guys so you can see how I took that information and parlayed it into my response. Sorry, somebody, Joe, stop putting silly comments in the chat. If you have a question, let me know.
Alexis, if you like, I can monitor the chat for you and let you know if there's any questions you need to answer.
Okay, thank you. So this appraiser made note of when Tidewater was revoked and when we got comparables, which, as you can see, was, I think, less than 24 hours was when I provided the comparables. So he noted that for one of the properties, let me see, it's very similar to comp 2 already in the report, but he said it was a more dated sale, but it was not outside of the date range allowed. One of them was already a comparable, 2 of them were already a comparable. So let me see. This is where we started getting into some really fun stuff with this particular one. One of the comparables that I used was put in the MLS as a comp only. And this was his argument. That property closed on blank for $210,000 per its MLS listing. It is a very similar property as comp 2 already in the report, but was entered as a comp only sale in the MLS, indicating the possibility of a less than typical market exposure. And because of that, he refused to use it as a comparable. Now, obviously, my immediate argument is it was put in the MLS as a comp only just because it was sold for sale by owner, does not negate that it was a good comparable. So I addressed that later on in my response. One of the other ones that he used basically said that it was in a competing subdivision. And then one of the other ones was not in the subdivision at all. And so he pretty much provided justification for not using any of the comparables that I submitted to him, and I was not satisfied with that response. And I felt like we had a much stronger argument for our value. So I took this opportunity to revise my grid based off of the feedback that he provided in his appraisal. So the first thing I did is the way that he numbered the comparables, he took them out of order from how I had provided them. So I reordered my comparables to be in line with his appraisal, since they would be reviewing his initial appraisal along with the additional information that I provided. So I reordered it. I got rid of one comparable that I didn't like. I didn't feel like it was doing any favors in justifying my argument. So I got rid of 200 Alike Lane. So instead of submitting them 6 comps, I submitted 5.
Alexis,
And then I also, yes?
You have a question. Have you found that appraisers won't use office exclusive or coming soon comps since they also didn't have typical market exposure?
Office exclusive is fairly newer. They're not going to use coming soon comps because they're still active. They're not really going to use active or pending comps unless it's under very extreme circumstances, and they usually have to provide some kind of additional justification for that. As far as office exclusive, I think that you could have a decent argument for it still applying, just like I did for sale by owner, as long as it justifies the sales price. A limited market that justifies the sales price is not a good reason not to use it. You would argue that at a larger market exposure, it would have sold for even more. That would be my thoughts on it. I'm not an appraiser, so be mindful of that. Thank you for the question, Christina. So in addition to that, I also chose to revise my letter and specifically highlight each thing that the appraiser referenced in his appraisal. So I know it's a little dry, but I'm going to go ahead and read it so that you guys can get an idea of what I said. I had said, to whom it may concern, a Tidewater request was received on the property under contract at 123 My Listing Drive, Alexis-town. Requested comparables were provided to the appraiser the following day, along with a letter of explanation detailing the comparables. After reviewing the comparables provided, the appraiser elected to make no changes. This has led us to request a reconsideration of value. After consulting with several other appraisers, I would like to present the following justifications for a reconsideration of value. Regarding comparable 1, 800 Approximate Road, the appraiser did a $3,000 negative adjustment for a screened-in porch, but did not perform a positive adjustment for the higher square footage of the subject. I also believe that the screened porch adjustment to be a little high based off of the quality of construction of the screened-in porch. I have included a photo of the screened-in porch for reference. So for that particular comparable, I just want to include this as, you know, a best practice. I reached out to the listing agent that had that property listed. I explained to her what was going on, and I asked for her permission in writing to use the photos from her listing to include in my letter to the VA. So I did at where it says, you know, pretend there are photos here. There were actually photos there, and I had written permission from the listing agent to use them. And she wished me luck. So regarding comparable 2, 900 Comp 1 Court, the appraiser only adjusted $42.62 per square foot, despite the consensus from other appraisers being that the adjustment should be anywhere from $50 to $60 per square foot in the Sneads Ferry area and in the subdivision in question. Regarding comparable 3, 400 Appraiser Comp Way, the appraiser used one of the lowest valued comparables in the community, priced at $130.74 per square foot, in lieu of a higher valued comparable that I provided at 200 Similar Drive, priced at $134.96 per square foot. His justification for not using the higher valued listing was because it was put in the MLS as a comparable sale only, as it was a for sale by owner. The property being sold as for sale by owner should not negate its value as a quality comparable for the subject property. I provided 2 additional comparables located outside of the community to further establish that the overall value is there, not just within the subject subdivision, but within the surrounding community as well. The appraiser acknowledged that 100 Lookalike Lane was similar and located in a competing neighborhood, and that 1000 Equivalent Highway was similar, but did not reference that it had a higher value than what he gave the subject. even though it was an inferior location on a highway. He refused to use either comparable despite it being considered a best practice to establish that a home's value is appropriate, not just for the subdivision that it's in, but for the surrounding community as well. I respectfully request that you consider the Tidewater comparables that I provided to the appraiser, along with my above justifications for the value of the home at 123 My Listing Drive, Alexis Town. Please don't hesitate to contact me with any questions. You guys get the drift. So that was the revised letter that I sent in with my revised grid, along with MLS sheets to the VA.
So with that one comp that was like out of the neighborhood and, you know, maybe a little bit farther away, Joe asked, have you found that appraisers can reject comps based on distance? Quote, I can only use comps within 1 mile of the subject property, etc.
I think it depends on the availability of comparables. I will say in this instance, all of my comparables were within 2 miles. And so I don't think that that would have been a good justification, especially because it was a more rural area. It's not like this was happening in the center of Jacksonville where it's densely populated. But if there are a really large amount of comparables that are in the immediate vicinity, both inside and outside of the neighborhood, I do think they're less likely to go far out. But every appraiser is different. We have to remember that an appraisal is an opinion of value, and you can send 2 licensed certified appraisers out to the same house and it could give you 2 completely different values. I saw the chat. Do we have another question or no?
He just mentioned it was actually off of Luther Banks Road.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it just depends. I would say that that's rural, but it depends on how many comparables he felt were closer than the comparable that was provided.
So it's not like a blanket rule. It's, you know, at least, you know, it depends on the appraiser, but it's more of, you know, it's just what's available and how far out will they go if there isn't anything available.
My understanding is they have best practices and they have preferred guidelines, but if the market does not provide comparables within those guidelines, they're allowed to go outside of them. They just typically provide an explanation as to why. So once you provide the additional information or resubmit your initial information, the VA will review your reconsideration of value. This may take a week or 2 before you hear anything back. So it's definitely a slower process than the initial Tidewater process. But one of 2 things will happen. The VA will either agree to increase the appraised value or not. This is one thing I will say, and I do not know the answer to this. I'm not sure if they can increase it nominally without still increasing it to the sales price. So this may help you get a few extra thousand. It may not get you the whole way there. This process for me has been done so rarely, which is by design. They don't want people immediately going to a reconsideration of value. This process has been done so rarely that I don't know if they'll meet you in the middle or if they either do like a full yes or no. So that's something to take into account. But any opportunity that you have to better represent your seller, to push for that value, is an opportunity worth trying to go after. If the VA does not agree to increase the appraised value, obviously the parties can either renegotiate the terms of the contract or they can agree to go their separate ways. So, questions? Anyone? You can chat or unmute yourself.
So you were successful in getting value in this particular instance?
I was. It was a $17,000 difference, and they gave us full contract value.
Cool. Good job.
Yeah, thank you. I felt like in this particular case, there was a lot of reason for them to do it. And like I said, I've had other ones that have underappraised. And when I go to look at the appraisal, you can't really fault them, especially in this market, you know, with everybody going over, with a lot of offers going over asking price. We're going to be seeing a lot of these requests. I don't necessarily think a reconsideration of value is always the right way to go. This particular example, trying to remember because we changed all the dates for my story. Hold on.
I think it was about a little less than 6 months ago, right?
Yeah, it was June or July of last year. The comparables sold in June and July.
Have you been successful in getting anybody to adjust for additional acreage?
So this kind of goes back to that one where I said the two appraisers can appraise the same property and have two very different opinions of value. I had a property that was on 10 acres that I sold several years ago, and it came in, I believe, about $60,000 under. And obviously my sellers were just, they were not going to do it, but it wasn't VA. So we weren't able to do a Tidewater request or anything like that. We just had to take what was provided. So we told the buyers that they could either switch lenders and get a new appraisal because their existing lender would not allow them to get a second appraisal. We told them that they could either switch or we were going to terminate and find a new buyer. And so they switched, and the new appraiser came in and gave us $3,000 over contract price. So, and actually, no, you know what? I did provide comparables for that one. That particular appraiser knocked off a whole bunch of value for quality of construction when it was just a pretty standard house. And then knocked off value for location because it was too far from the city, but it was on Harther Drive, which is like 7 miles. So I even tried to argue that one, that, you know, hey, based off of proximity, like it's 7 miles from city center. So how can you argue that this is any farther out from town than Dawson Cabin? And that's one of those examples where, you know, you can try all of your different methods. A lot of it's going to depend on the appraiser. And I think if I had known about the reconsideration of value process back then, I would have probably tried to go that route, but I didn't.
I had one down in Hampstead and it came in $10,000 short. And I got him to meet in the middle. We actually got $5,000 in value in the difference.
From Tidewater?
Yep, on a Tidewater with a reconsideration. And the thing was, is the appraiser didn't want to give any difference, but the subjects that he picked had inferior lots. So I was able to pick apart the location of the site and show the flood zone that was on 2 out of 4 of his comps that weren't on ours. I was able to show elevation and pick apart the wetlands and be like, you got this is not the same kind of site. You know, this one is 15 foot below sea level from the subject. You've got to give some consideration there. So sometimes it's not always just about the house. You can pick apart that lot too. I had another one earlier last year, and it was a property that was on a creek that you could totally get a John boat or a little skiff in. But it was way bigger than canoe or kayak. And he used a couple comps and took away land value and did some stupid things. And the comps were literally on a ditch with a branch that didn't have water unless it was after a hurricane. So we had to get into the navigable water discussion with him. And we were able to get some value back there. So, you know, don't just look at your typical heated square footage and that kind of stuff. Sometimes you can get you a little bit of value based back on the land if you do it right.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad that you said that because it answers the question I had earlier about a reconsideration of value. They may only give you partial, but it's another opportunity to better represent your clients by being able to push for more. Sorry about that.
Okay, so the other one, I got one since you mentioned new construction and quality construction. How are you seeing Tidewaters and like the upgrades? You know, you got 20, 30 grand worth of upgrades in this house versus this one over here that was a base model. Have you run across anything like that?
I have not, but I'm curious too, because I've got like 4 new construction under contract, but they're still being built. So it's going to be interesting.
Want me to jump in here?
Yeah, Amy, by all means, please.
Okay, so everybody, well, and maybe not everybody knows. So we primarily do new construction. If you're not aware of what's been happening to lumber since COVID struck, it now costs at least $24,000 more to build a house today than it did last year. That is actual cost of building. There is no inflation to it. There is no nothing. But we keep getting appraisers that don't either know that or care. but it's actual cost of building. Like there shouldn't be, you know, a huge discussion on that. Now, that doesn't mean that every house needs to be adjusted $24,000, but there are a lot of things in new construction that you can kind of, so I know when Alexis was, you know, she started out and said, you know, you don't make adjustments, you just give them your ideas. I love when Navy Fed calls Tidewater, they send you an Excel spreadsheet, and it is the most fantastic Tidewater grid. If you do not have one, get one, because it does the calculations for you and it makes the adjustments, and it is a VA approved form that will make adjustments. So this is really kind of key for what we do, because what I'm basically doing is, you know, for every 2 months that house is older, I'm adding $2,000. Because if it went up $24,000 in 1 year, which is 12 months, we're going to pretend this was a linear increase. It wasn't, but this is the best we can do. We're not lumber suppliers. We're not even the builder, you know, but you do have to make adjustments for that. So, at the beginning, we were having a little bit of pushback on that because, you know, the lumber could have been ordered back when. So the only access that we really have to records, I mean, we could ask the builder, what day did you order these trusses? Whether they would ever get back to us or not is whatever. So what I ended up doing was pulling building permits straight from county records. Because once the building permit is ordered, that's probably a pretty good indication that the trusses were ordered real similar after that. So, you know, we're kind of going by that. So that's one. As for the upgrades, you don't get a whole lot of room on any grids to really go over. I know Alexis said she kind of has that little catch-all at the bottom where she does, you know, porch, patio, all that stuff's in there and anything else. What I do is either write as much as I can in those little boxes or put like some asterisks and then send that letter like Alexis said to do as well. And I really do. I say almost the exact same thing she did. I just say, you know, hey, lender, please attach this verbiage, you know, to the grid when it goes, because this is important. And I usually start off saying, hey, listen, we built every one of the houses in this neighborhood. I know what upgrades went in these and which didn't, and all of that stuff. And we are the source. The builder is the source. We, you know, this is good information that may not be in the MLS. And I don't know that any lender has never passed that along, but I really will go through there. And I do make the a little sentence in there about the lumber prices. I also attach a link to Builder Trend, like the actual website where builders get all of their information that talked about that $24,000 increase. I paste that link into the email and I just say, listen, I am not making up this number. This is what has come down. Of course, it's not exactly the same for every house, all that stuff, but the more information that you can push, I mean, I wouldn't make it like over a page long because they're not going to read that, but as much as you can. And then I do go into the upgrades and I say, listen, and again, of course, you know, the builders are putting, you know, a little bit of padding on their upgrades, but it still is a cost of that building, and they are real numbers. If you know that, you know, upgrading to stage 3 quartz instead of stage 1 granite is $7,000, tell them, you know, I mean, we know VA appraisers used to say usable surface is usable surface. But that's not the way that our market is working right now. So any little bit like that you can put in there is great. But I would either try to add that to the bottom of that grid as much as possible, or like I said, if it's too much information, you know, just put those asterisks or see exhibit A or whatever you need to do, but just really always ask the lender to pass along your explanation for why you're, you know, why these adjustments make sense in your head. But I actually do put adjustments on my grid because I hit the space bar. I want them to know where I'm coming from with that, because it's each house is different, even if you're looking at the exact same floor plan. So I guess that's the big takeaway for any Tidewater is don't panic and, you know, let them know where you're coming from, because I think we all know also that sometimes Tidewater gets called and you as the listing agent have never gotten a call from the appraiser saying they were going out. So it's just possible that yours are the first comps they're even seeing. Not saying that this happens all the time, but we know that it does. So definitely put that foot forward because they do have timelines. And if they're in a pinch, they may very well be initiating this, not for no reason, but it is your chance to get your numbers in front of the right people. So don't roll your eyes at them. Just do it happily and try to get your numbers pushed.
To kind of build off of that, as far as materials, I know that our market does not traditionally give value for upgraded materials, but I had a townhouse that we had 1 million comparables for. I told the seller, this is what I think we're looking at. And he insisted on overpricing it by like $10,000. And it was one of those where it was like, all right, fine. The market will teach you what you need to learn. But we did, it was beautiful. When he bought it, he went in, he bought it as a foreclosure, and he put in LVP and tile and granite and redid everything. And so it was the prettiest townhouse on the block. And it went under contract, and we got Tidewater called on it. And it was in the beginning of COVID. So the appraiser did not physically go in. He based everything off of the photos. And so when it called Tidewater, it goes back to, you just have to do what's in the best interest of your clients. You may not even be convinced, but you still have to do the best you can do to convince. And so I put together my comparable grid, and it did not justify the sales price at all, but I put together a really good letter and was like, I know that all these other houses didn't sell for remotely what we're asking, but this one's got brand new LVP flooring. This one's got granite countertops. This one's got brand new stainless steel appliances. This one's got an upgraded bathroom. And I mentioned all the things that the seller had put into this house that one would think would not really contribute to the value at all. And it appraised. And so he got that value, even though I, to this day, will say that it was probably about $10,000 overpriced for a townhouse. But we got it. And, it's changed the value in that entire community. But sometimes you never know what the thing that you're going to say is going to be that makes that difference to that appraiser. So even if you're not 100% convinced, you owe it to your client to put your best argument forward. Anybody else have anything to add or any questions to ask?
Just real quick. I know you said that like the reconsideration of value is not really supposed to be like something you're supposed to jump at. Sometimes you just have to accept that the value is not there. But can you kind of go through how, like, the initial Tidewater, like just any advice that you have for how you find your comps? Do you base it off of the comps from your CMA, or just, any advice that you can give people before they get to that point to where they may need to take that reconsideration action?
I will reference my CMA, but there can be a good amount of time that passes in between the CMA and the appraisal, especially in this market. 3 weeks can make a ton of difference. So I'll go back and reference my CMA, but I'll go back and repull comps, and I'll take a look at the new stuff that's closed as well. As far as the reconsideration, I always go back and I look at the appraisal since we actually have it then. But otherwise, when you're doing a Tidewater, you have no idea what you're working with. You don't know how far off you are. You don't know what comparables they've used. So I try at that point to pull as many comparables as I can reasonably justify to just strengthen that argument. Even if my market analysis only had 3 comps in it, I'm going to try to pull as many as I can to justify the contract price of my listing, because if one isn't going to do it for them, maybe the other one will. And so, I almost would like to inundate them with information, keeping in mind what Amy said. Don't write them a 3-page novel about your market. But, if I can fit a good amount of comparables, the way I look at it is the more information you can provide that makes your property look better, the better it is for your clients and the better chance that you have. And then just don't recreate the wheel. Have the templates for these things already saved in a designated place in your computer, because a lot of it is extremely time sensitive. So as soon as you get that information, as soon as you're able to, you need to pull those comps, you need to have it ready to go, and you need to get it back to them, because you don't want your delay in response to be the reason why your additional comparables weren't considered. Any other questions? Anybody want to add anything? I see the chat popping up. I think that's it. So hold on.
I think that might be it.
Wait, I have a slide for this. Thank you for joining me.
I was just gonna say, is it okay if people have questions when they encounter this, for them to reach out to you? I know you put your contact info on that slide, so if anybody wants to screenshot it, maybe they can give you a call and ask for advice or anything of that nature.
Yeah, I'm always happy to help. You know, a lot of my knowledge has just come from trial and error and experience and doing things. And like I said, I had an appraisal several years ago where I didn't know that a reconsideration of value was a thing. But now that I've done it and I've successfully gone through the process and I've seen the benefit of it, you know, it's something that all of us can use for the betterment of our clients. And so, you know, please don't hesitate to call, you know, at my firm, not at my firm, I don't care. I just like to help. So give me a buzz if you guys ever need anything.
Thank you guys for joining.
Have a great day, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. We'll see you guys.
Wasn't that fun?